The day when David died was the hardest day I have ever had to endure. He suffered a massive stroke that came as a complete surprise to everyone else. He died almost immediately after it happened when he was 58 years old. He was not only my husband, but he was also my best friend and the father of our daughter, Chloe. It was finished in the span of a few seconds after we had been together for 17 years. I found myself standing there all by myself, clutching his hand in the cold, sterile room of the hospital as his pulse steadily diminished. He was a strong, competent man who could fix any situation, and who always knew just what to do. Nevertheless, in the final moments that he had, all he desired from me was something that was so simple that it was also impossible to achieve. At a time when he was hardly able to gather any strength at all, he squeezed my hand, and I could see the plea in his eyes. "Please, Naomi," he whispered. "Make a promise to me. Make a promise that you will never go to that retreat property." I granted him my word, of course. David was a man who had a tendency to keep certain aspects of his life to himself. I was conscious of the fact that there was information that he had not disclosed to me, and that he was not interested in me being aware of it. Nevertheless, you carry out his wish when, in his final moments, he asks you to do something for him. Even if your inquiries continue to accumulate, or if your curiosity continually gnaws at you. David did not take secrets that were shared with him lightly, and did not keep them to himself. I treated his wishes with respect. For an extended period of time, I left it completely unattended. I focused my energy on healing and also on providing assistance for Chloe, who had just begun her journey in college. Nevertheless, I eventually succumbed to the desire that I had postponed for a few years. After David had left, I was abandoned in a house that was full to the brim with memories, some of which were horrible and others of which were lovely. On a Tuesday like any other, I received a phone call from David's lawyer, Mr. Harrison. At that particular moment, I was going through his things. He kept his tone composed and solemn as he spoke to her. "Mrs. Sterling," he said, "I have something to give to you. It is from your husband. After his death, it was his explicit instructions that this was to be delivered to you alone." The nature of this telephone discussion was evidently out of the usual, despite the highly formal tone that he was using. Taking everything into account, what is it that David may have potentially left behind for me that I am not cognizant of? Following the end of the service for the funeral, everything in the home was in order. I had the understanding that all of the loose ends had already been tied up. That particular afternoon, I arrived at Mr. Harrison's office, with an odd sense of weight in my chest. I am the recipient of both a small wooden box and an envelope that he gave. It felt as though the weight of the box was putting a significant strain on my hands. I found an antique, complex key with a metal keychain that was crafted in the shape of a leaf when I opened it. After being utterly confused, I turned it over in my hand once. "What is this for?" I said as I made an effort to keep the feeling of unease that was welling up inside me from showing. Mr. Harrison made the following statement. "It's for a piece of real estate in Lake Arrowhead. Your husband purchased it about 4 years ago, but he left specific instructions that you were only to learn about it after his death." I stared at him in bewilderment. Is that the Lake Arrowhead Resort in the state of California? I had never heard David mention a second home before, let alone one that was located so far away. There wasn't a single moment in time when he brought up the subject of him owning anything other than our house. I whispered quietly, "This doesn't add up in the slightest. David never spoke about this. Why would he buy a house there?" Mr. Harrison placed his glasses on his face and cast his gaze downward toward the documents that were in front of him. "I'm afraid I can't answer that. But there's more. The property, called the Crestwood Estate, has become quite valuable over the last 2 years. A large developer, Summit Resorts, is building a luxury resort in the area. They've made several multi-million-dollar offers for the house." I felt a wave of lightheadedness sweep over me. Throughout his life, David was never in possession of a large amount of money. We led a comfortable lifestyle, but we didn't do anything that could be considered extravagant. I was working as a teacher at the university while he was working in the engineering field. How can it be that he was able to purchase a residence like this and not mention a single thing about it to me? Why did he decide to keep it in the dark, anyway? As I turned the envelope over, I became aware of the fact that the handwriting on the front was that of David. The text that was inscribed there happened to be Naomi. My hands were shaking as I tore it open with my bare hands. The letter started out with the phrase, "My dearest Naomi, if you are reading this, it means I left sooner than I expected. Forgive me for all the secrets I kept. The house is yours now. Over the past 4 years, I transformed that somber place from my childhood into something I hope you find beautiful. I know I made you promise never to go there. I am undoing that promise now. In fact, I ask you to go just once before you decide what to do with the property." The letter went on to describe how, in the study of the house, I would be able to find his laptop, which had a password that was comprised of the date of our first encounter, followed by the word hope, the word that he believed I had taught him to feel again. He put his signature on it with affection, as he had done in the past. I brought the letter up to my chest. I could sense the tears starting to spring up. David, my David, had an entire new universe, an entire different side of him that I was never privy to. Why had he never mentioned that to me before? I do not understand. What is the motivation behind all of this secrecy? Despite the fact that I had given him a promise, I was still in possession of the key to a secret that had not been revealed to me. Following a short pause, the attorney started to speak. I had the sensation that I was unable to breathe because the area was so confined. "Mrs. Sterling, I must inform you of something else. David's family is contesting the will. His brother, Marcus Sterling, claims that David was not of sound mind when he purchased the property. I believe they will try to claim the house for themselves." I was overcome with the sensation of a lump forming in my throat. What can you tell me about his family? Despite the fact that I thought I had a thorough understanding of David, there were apparently a lot of aspects about him that I had failed to understand. It was imperative that I see the property in person. I had no other option than to discover out what David had been keeping from me, and what he had been keeping from me that was so important that he had to keep me away from it. 2 days later, I found myself driving alone through the Cascade Range by myself. I was making my way toward Lake Arrowhead. My thoughts were in a state of complete confusion and horror. Breathing also was a significant challenge for me. I parked my vehicle in front of an old gate made of carved wood, upon which the phrase Crestwood Estate was etched into a piece of wrought iron. My heartbeat started to quicken as soon as I took the key and entered it into the lock. Once the gate had slowly and noisily swung open, the land that was beyond came into view. It was far more than just a simple dwelling place. Surrounded by grounds that had been properly tended and oak trees that rose up over the structure, the mansion was built of stone and wood. Everything gave the impression of having been completely renovated. It all looked spanking new, as though it had been completely transformed. A walkway made of stone led to the entryway, which could be accessed by going down it. The property that David had previously indicated, which had been abandoned to ruin and desolation, was not this property here. This was an entirely other type of material. With my hands trembling, I proceeded on and turned the key in the lock of the door to the front. It made a quiet clicking sound when it swung open. As soon as I laid eyes on what was waiting for me inside, I was completely immobilized. Every wall and every corner of the house were adorned with paintings that were hung there. Flowers are referred to as orchids. Orchids are my greatest passion and obsession. They are the one thing that David knew I loved more than anything else in the world. My biggest passion, my most all-consuming obsession, and the one thing that David recognized was more important to me than anything else were orchids. I sucked in a fast intake instinctively, and my palms sprang up to cover my mouth. I have never seen this side of him before. This is a new aspect of him. Every single piece of art at the gallery, which used to be a mansion, was more beautiful than the one before it, and every single one of the pieces had orchids. On the table, next to the window, there was a laptop that was made of silver. Before I was able to recognize the sound of the tires on top of the gravel, I was not able to get much closer. I felt my chest begin to pound as a result of my heart suddenly speeding up. As I was looking out the window, I noticed that a black SUV was coming up from behind my vehicle. 3 men got off the boat, and all of them bore a striking resemblance to David. The family that I had never previously encountered was the Sterling family. The family was not present to receive the widow, as evidenced by the fact that they did not appear to be welcoming her based on their facial expressions. They had arrived at the residence with the purpose of viewing the interior. I quickly closed the door behind me and took a step back. My breath came in short, harsh gasps. What had occurred in this situation? What possible reason could David have for not telling me this? Additionally, what was the reason for his insistence that I make a promise that I would never set foot in this location again? The knocking started. Naomi, we are aware that you are inside. It is imperative that we discuss this matter. I was not at all confident that I knew who these people were, but I was confident in one thing. They had not come to welcome me. The reason for their arrival was not the same as the one that was stated. I did not have any knowledge at all of what that was. Every time the knocker struck the door, the sound became more intense, making my heart start to pound faster and faster. Naomi, we know you're in there. We need to talk. I continued to remain in the same place, my palm still gripping the door frame. It felt as if the mansion, which was the focal point of the secret world that my husband inhabited, was encroaching on me. The atmosphere was thick with tension as a result of the large number of questions that remained unanswered. What was the identity of these men and women? What is it that they were hoping to get out of me? Additionally, what is the reason why David has never mentioned them or this site to me? I decided to move away from the entryway and head for the window instead. As I was peering through the curtains, I caught a glimpse of them. Every single one of the three males had an undeniable resemblance to David. The eyes of both individuals are identical in shape, taking on the form of an almond. They bore a similarity to David, but they were not actually him. They possessed the same thin and tall body types, as well as the same strong jawline. His family, who he had maintained at a distance throughout his whole life, was collectively known as the Sterlings. David would sometimes have the same severe, calculating attitude that the eldest sibling, Marcus, always wore, especially when he was cornered into a position where he had no other options. With his demeanor seemingly exuding a composed intensity, Elijah stood at his side. Isaiah, the youngest member of the group, exhibited the same behavior. He was a little quieter than the others, but he still gave off an air of entitlement. Speaking to each other in quiet accents, they were all gathered together on the porch. Following that, Marcus knocked on the door again one time. Naomi, we know you're in there. We need to talk. I did not know what the correct course of action was. I kept hearing the warnings that David had given me in my thoughts about his family. He had always made a point of keeping his distance from all of them. There were some comments that had been made regarding them, but they had been unclear, and nothing had been proven. I, on the other hand, was standing by myself, confronted with the demands that they had made. Meanwhile, they were standing at the entrance to the house that he had changed with so much love and care. I did not intend to grant them permission to enter. I was not about to allow them to take charge. I would not do that to David because of everything that he has done for me, for the both of us. I drew in a deep breath and bent down to collect the silver laptop that was resting on top of the table. The words that David had written to me in his letter continued to reverberate in my mind. I was told that the study of the house is where my laptop will be situated. I knew that the story contained more elements than the ones shown there. I was unsure of what I should do, but I knew that I needed to find some answers. It was necessary for me to have knowledge of the events that had occurred in the life of David prior to our acquaintance. As the beating persisted, the screams grew increasingly frenzied and loud. I made my way back to the entrance and turned around once I got there. At some point in time, I was ultimately compelled to go from this location. I made my way over to the desk, sat down, and turned on the laptop. My hands were shaking as I did so. When the screen flickered into existence, I felt a sense of relief that it was operating. Naomi, I murmured, as if David were reaching out to me personally from the depths of history. It was via his remarks and his recordings that his presence could be perceived in this very space. I accessed the folder with the name Naomi. Upon opening it, I discovered that it included hundreds of films, each of which had a date associated with it. By clicking on it, I chose the first choice. When David's face appeared on the screen, his eyes were glowing and full of vitality, which gave the idea that everything was well with him. "Greetings, my dearest," he murmured with a crooked smile that was as familiar as the sound of his voice, playing on his lips. "You are viewing this because I have departed. And being familiar with you, I am aware that it is most probable that you did not wait. It is very probable that you ended up in this place. I am not able to find the particular item that you are searching for." I made a conscious effort to keep my gaze fixed on the television in front of me, even though my eyes were welling up with tears. David resumed speaking after pausing for a moment to throw a glance below at an object that was not visible to the camera. He posted a comment that read, "I should have guessed that you wouldn't be able to resist, particularly in light of the fact that Mr. Harrison had informed you about the house. After this comment, this happened. This is the house. I made a promise to myself that I would never walk through its doors again. At this stage, it is no longer a simple residence. It is your future. It was my intention to give you something that you deserve, therefore I ordered it for you, Naomi. The fact that I requested you to stay away is something that I am fully conscious of. I am going to renege on that promise right away, though." I was overcome by the mixture of love and anguish that his comments radiated. Even if it meant keeping certain portions of his life past a secret, he was always there to protect me and to shield me from sorrow. I eventually became cognizant of the fact that ever since I had been watching him on television, David had been planning for the future. He had come fully prepared to deal with this situation before it even arose. As the video continued to play, the look of concern on David's face grew more intense. "I would want to draw your attention to a certain quality that this feature possesses. It was not just for you. I purchased it for other people as well. It was more complicated than simply having a place to go away from everything, and it is one element of a more comprehensive scheme." I paused the movie and froze the frame, my voice shaking in a way that I was unable to control. The knocking that was happening at the door was getting more forceful. What was the subject of his conversation? Was it a proposal that was even more comprehensive? Did this property really have anything to do with me? Or was someone else involved? When I got up onto my feet, I walked over to the door and removed the blue folder from the drawer. From the other side of the door, where he was demanding that I let them in, I could hear Marcus's voice. "Please open the door, Naomi. We are completely within our legal rights to be in this location. You do not belong to this location. This house was never meant to be yours." I pushed myself to conquer my feelings of anxiety and discomfort. "You don't know anything about David," I said in a voice that did not tremble, despite my anxiety. "This house has been fated for me since the very beginning of time. And none of you have any claim to it, I can assure you." I continued to remain strong in spite of the fact that the door kept rattling. I was not going to let them abuse me like that. I was not going to allow what David had left for me to be taken away from me. After a short length of time, the other person on the line remained silent. Having spoken once more from the other side of the door, Marcus's voice was softer this time around. "Naomi, we need to talk. You are not aware of this, but the house was a two-story structure with a tiny porch. It was painted white, and there was a small garden in the front yard. A wooden fence surrounded the house. It was unlike the other houses in the neighborhood." "I understand completely," I said fiercely. "Your only concern is the financial gain. David, on the other hand, was more intelligent than you. He was completely aware of the actions he was taking. And you are not going to take it away from me." I was cognizant of the fact that I would not be able to keep them at bay indefinitely. All I needed was to give myself a little more time. I went back to the laptop and chose the next video that was shown. David's face made another appearance within the range of vision. "Naomi, I apologize. I should have kept you informed of everything. I should have notified you about all of this a long time ago. Nevertheless, I bought this land because I knew that one day my family would come to claim it." I was able to hear David let out a sigh at the point that the video came to a temporary halt. "They never picked up on it, did they, Marcus, Elijah, and Isaiah? They believe that they are worthy of this location. However, I am no longer interested in them. I had feelings of concern for you. I was concerned about how happy you were. That is the reason why I went to every length possible to make certain that you would be taken care of once I am gone." Someone speaks the words, "Naomi, I love you. I have always been that way." My eyes welled up with tears yet again. I could feel the gravity of his love and his sacrifice. It went far beyond material possessions. It was much more than just a house. David had created something beautiful, and he had created it for me because he knew that I would need it. I was not going to let anyone take that away from me. I could hear the sound of tires crunching on gravel all of a sudden. I glanced out the window again, and this time I saw a silver SUV approaching, followed by a black one. When I finally realized who they were, my heart sank instantly. They were the Sterling family. They had arrived with reinforcements. This time, on the other hand, I was ready. How will Naomi go about confronting his family as they attempt to take control of the land that he left behind? David was in possession of information that he was unable to disclose to Naomi. Will Naomi be able to muster the strength to fight for what is rightfully hers? Or will the burden of the secrets that her late husband kept buried be too heavy for her to bear? Naomi had finally come to the realization that the dispute was no longer simply a matter of property. Her struggle was to protect the memories that she had, to preserve her life, and to safeguard the legacy that David had left behind. This conflict over ownership of the Crestwood estate had evolved into a struggle that encompassed much more than a disagreement between family members. It had become a conflict of wills, a fight of trust, and above all, a battle for the truth. When the sound of automobiles arriving in the driveway shattered her trance, Naomi was deep in thought. Naomi felt her heart skip a beat in that moment. The brothers Sterling had arrived, and they had brought additional support with them. David's brothers were Elijah, Isaiah, and Marcus. They were determined to take possession of everything that David had left to her, even if it meant having to walk all over her and Chloe in order to accomplish it. After wiping the tears from her eyes, she got up and cast a glance in the direction of the laptop. David's photograph was pinned on the screen, and although he was no longer alive, he was still beaming at her with a smile. Naomi found it impossible to ignore the pang of need that he was not there. It felt as though he were still with her, guiding her and showing her the path that she should take. However, at that moment it was unclear which direction they should go in. She did not see any other option other than to face his brothers and reveal the truth. She drew in a long breath, closed the laptop, tucked it behind her arm, and then made her way over to the entrance door. The moment that she opened the door, she immediately became aware of the seriousness of the situation. As he stood on the porch, Marcus Sterling was the first person to speak. "Naomi," he started, keeping his voice level while also letting a slightly darker emotion seep in. "I see that you are still participating in this game. However, I believe that you are aware, just as I am, that you are not a part of this place. You do not have the right to maintain this residence." Naomi would not let any of her emotions get the better of her, despite the fact that what he said was hurtful. She maintained her resolve and did not waver in her stance. Her gaze remained unwavering and steady. "This house is mine," she declared in a voice that did not tremble in the slightest. "David is the one who left it to me. I am well within my legal rights to be in this place. If you think that you have the ability to take this from me, then you are under a mistaken belief." Marcus drew nearer and gave his features permission to relax as he tried out a fresh technique. "We both know, Naomi, that David did not leave you much property. His health was not in a good condition at the time when he made these judgments. His mental state was not what it should have been. You should feel grateful for the offer that we have provided you with. We are giving you a fair portion of the estate. What is the motivation behind opposing this? Or, alternatively, what is the motivation behind setting up a barrier to this? I am not able to find the particular item that you are searching for." Naomi held back from expressing the intense anger that she was experiencing at that moment. "Marcus, you aren't understanding this," she remarked in response. David had a complete and thorough awareness of the circumstances. He knew what was going on. He made these judgments because he was cognizant of the fact that such things were imminent. "You were the one he was protecting me against. From each and every one of you." After taking a pause, Marcus looked back over his shoulder at Elijah and Isaiah. The two brothers who were there with him stood quietly, their expressions impossible to discern. Isaiah's gaze flitted back and forth between the two individuals as if he were awaiting the appearance of a signal, but there was no such thing. Naomi was not going to back down. Naomi stood her ground and stepped out onto the porch without retreating from her position. "David was fully cognizant of the capabilities that you possessed. He was also cognizant of the fact that you would attempt to confiscate this residence. He had anticipated that, Marcus. He left evidence behind. He left everything behind for me to use as weapons against you. And that is precisely what I want to accomplish." Naomi, Marcus said with a grave and gloomy expression. "Do you really believe that you have all of your ducks in a row? Do you believe that David left you everything in order for us to go to war? He was on his deathbed," he continued. His thoughts were not coherent. You are chasing after ghosts here in this place. Nope, Marcus, she said, raising her palm to her face to interrupt him in the middle of his statement. My goal is to find out what the truth is. The fact that you have tried to bury beneath your feet. I am going to make every effort to guarantee that the plan that David came up with will be fully implemented. As a result, this property is mine to keep, and I will continue to possess it no matter how many of you decide to come to my door. Despite the fact that he made a scornful expression, Naomi perceived the glimmer of doubt that flashed across Marcus's gaze. The fact that she was so determined unsettled him because he was accustomed to doing anything that he set his mind to. He was not accustomed to people who were against the things that he said or did. It is safe to assume that this is not a woman who is in the midst of grieving the loss of her husband. His voice was filled with disdain as he muttered, "All right then. The following is something that you should keep in mind. From this point on, your circumstances can only become worse. Naomi, you have taken on more than you are capable of managing. You are oblivious to the obstacles that await you in the future. There is nothing left for Naomi to be afraid of. There is nothing that he or any of the other people can do to her. I own everything I need to win, Marcus. I will emerge victorious in the end. You have taken action. It is my turn to speak now." While Naomi was in the middle of speaking, she suddenly became conscious of the fact that the ground was moving beneath her feet. At that point in time, the face-off had scarcely begun. They were under the impression that they could cow her into a state of subservience, but they did not realize the level of her resilience. They underestimated the lengths to which David had gone in order to protect her. After turning her back on them, Naomi went inside and slammed the door shut behind her. She did not have any time to waste. There were further puzzles to unravel and additional films to watch. There was still a long way to go before the controversy over the ownership of the Crestwood estate was resolved. As she made her way back to the study room, her thoughts continued to speed. She discovered the laptop sitting on the desk, and it had not been moved from its previous spot when she last saw it. After that, she opened it again and proceeded to choose the video that was played following the previous one. Once again, the face of David appeared on the television. Speaking with a consistent tone of voice and maintaining an air of composure were his behaviors. To begin, he said, "Naomi, if you are viewing this, it is apparent that matters have reached a point of confusion. The brothers are going to start carrying out their strategy in the near future. However, you are familiar with what this is, aren't you? I have taken care of that already. I have made a record of all the facts. They are unaware of the plan that I have devised for you." As Naomi lowered herself to the ground and took a seat, the sound of her heartbeat resounded loudly in her chest. She was cognizant of the important part that this recording was going to play in the future. David did not simply offer a straightforward message. Rather, his comments provided a blueprint for how to attain success. David continued on, stating, "Here's the deal. They are unaware of the actual value of the property. There is more to it than just being a place of habitation. It is a part of something that is bigger in size or scope. Summit Resorts has more to offer than what is first apparent. The truth of the situation is that the amount of money that is being given for the land is much lower than the land's actual worth. Furthermore, Naomi, if they intend to take it away from you, you are obligated to make sure that they are cognizant of that fact." As Naomi took a break from watching the movie, she eagerly tapped away on her keyboard. All of a sudden, she had a renewed sense of purpose in life. It was not without reason that Summit Resorts, the developers, had their sights set on the Crestwood estate. On the other hand, David had made certain that she had the means at her disposal to gain the upper hand over them. She picked up the folder that David had forgotten behind him and opened it. The words "Crestwood Legal" were written on the label. There were notes from meetings with Summit Resorts, contracts, and documents inside of it. The Sterlings were not the only people with whom she had to deal. There was a much larger game going on in this situation. David had been made aware of the plans for development long before any other person became cognizant of these plans. He had taken every measure to ensure that all of this knowledge was kept under wraps until the timing was right. He had systematically organized everything. That moment has finally arrived. As Naomi was working her way through the documents, she was beginning to form a clearer understanding of the situation. David had made certain that she had everything she needed to protect their property and their family's future. The mansion was no longer the only thing that mattered in their relationship. What was important now was the legacy that he had established for her. She was not going to let anyone take away from her the inheritance he had left to her. The organization that owns the resort is the subject of the meeting that I have arranged with the developer, David announced. If you want to gain a valuable ally from them, you must approach them in the right way. Because they will be interested in purchasing the property, you have the power to improve this situation, Naomi. You have the ability to negotiate. You can ensure that this land remains in your possession. I am going to make sure that this stays in our possession, David, Naomi declared after giving a nod of assent. Her chest swelled with determination. There is nothing that I will not do. Naomi felt her heart begin to race as she thought about what was to come. Before he left, David had come up with a strategy for her that would provide her with everything she needed to outsmart the Sterling brothers and maintain possession of the Crestwood estate. However, the situation was becoming increasingly dire at this point. Marcus, Elijah, and Isaiah were only part of the problem. There were other people involved as well. Summit Resorts was on the verge of taking over the property, and Naomi was well aware that she would have to utilize every last bit of power and cunning that David had trained her with in order to successfully navigate this conflict. Her resolve only grew stronger as she paced back and forth across the estate's enormous hall. The sound of her footfall echoed off the smooth stone flooring with each step she took, serving as a continual reminder of the legacy that David had established for her. This was not merely a house. It was the culmination of all that he had accomplished in order to ensure that she would have a future, even after his death. She made her entrance into the study and took hold of the heavy folder that contained all of the evidence that David had painstakingly compiled. The Sterling brothers made an attempt to intimidate her into submission, but they were not aware of the knowledge that she possessed. They did not have a complete understanding of the situation. It was another time that the laptop was playing back the footage that came from David. If you are seeing this, Naomi, then things have most likely reached a critical stage. I will not sanitize the truth when I tell you that a conflict is coming your way. There are some difficult choices that you will need to make. I have, however, prepared the foundation. I have scheduled a meeting with the developers at Summit Resorts. They will be presenting you with an offer. Do not be deceived. Their offer is too low. The value of the property is significantly higher than the amount that they are willing to offer. I want you to be steadfast. Be sure to think about every option before you make a decision. Naomi could tell that David's words carried a sense of urgency, despite the fact that his voice remained calm and steady. She paused the video for a moment. He was the one who stayed cool, the one who thought things through, and the one who had a complete understanding of the situation when everyone else was overcome by confusion. Nevertheless, that obligation has now been transferred to her. Gathering her courage, Naomi took a deep breath and stood up straight. She was not going to allow anyone to take this away from her. Not the Sterlings, not the developers, and certainly not anyone who believed they could influence her or her child. Chloe, her daughter, was the one person who had always been her staunchest supporter, and the one who knew her better than anybody else. She had Chloe. They would tackle the approaching storm together. She did not come unattended. Naomi had already made arrangements to meet with Summit Resorts beforehand. The moment had arrived to determine whether or not the foresight that David had displayed had genuinely prepared her for the events that were going to take place. She was under no delusions regarding the conflict that was waiting for her in the future. She was aware that the developers would want to purchase the land for a fraction of its actual value, but she also realized that she had leverage in the situation. The contract might be made or broken based on the facts that David had obtained regarding the resort project, the concealed potential of Crestwood, and the surrounding area. The meeting was set to occur the following day. In front of the mirror, Naomi made a few last-minute adjustments to her blazer. Naomi had spent the entire evening reviewing every piece of paper, every email, and every scrap of information that David had left behind. This was no longer just a matter of property. It was also about gaining control over her destiny and Chloe's. It was in order to preserve the inheritance that David had bestowed upon her. She reflected on the Sterling brothers, Marcus's self-satisfied assurance, Elijah's legal maneuvering, and Isaiah's subdued belligerence. They had already begun to circle around her like vultures, looking for the opportunity to pounce the moment she made a mistake. However, she possessed knowledge that they were unaware of. Naomi made her way into the living room and discovered Chloe sitting there, waiting for her arrival. They had spent several hours discussing everything that had taken place: the brothers, the estate, and the disconcerting reality of David's condition and his final months. Chloe was David's daughter through and through, with his keen intellect and his talent for reading people. Naomi could see the qualities of strength and drive that were present in her. She was not simply David's child. She was also Naomi's companion in this struggle. When Naomi drew nearer, Chloe rose to her feet and declared, "Mother, are you confident that you are ready for this? Unfortunately, I am not able to pinpoint the particular object that you are in search of." Taking a deep breath to collect herself, Naomi braced herself. "I don't think I'll ever be prepared for this, but I don't really have any other options," she said. "We'll do this together." Together, Chloe stated with conviction as she nodded in accord. "Let's make them feel remorseful for having ever believed that they were able to take this away from us." Naomi and Chloe made their way to the location where the meeting was going to take place the next morning. The Crestwood estate, which was full of rustic beauty, stood in stark contrast to the sleek, modern office complex that was located in the downtown area. Naomi had previously prepared herself to deal with the intense pressure of the situation. They were not going to be able to cow her. The instant that Naomi set foot inside the building, the weight of the events that were imminent in the future bore down on her shoulders. At that moment, everything would either fall into place or spiral into chaos. When Naomi arrived, she was greeted in the boardroom by Mr. Alluston, the CEO of Summit Resorts, as well as several of his top executives. Naomi was able to see the tension that lay just beneath the surface despite the fact that they were acting in a manner that was both kind and professional. They were extremely eager to come to a resolution about the situation at hand. As Mr. Alluston replied, "Sterling, thank you for meeting with us today." His smile did not quite reach his eyes. "I understand that this may be a challenging situation for you, but we are here in order to provide you with a very generous offer for your house. This property is essential to the success of the project because our development plans for the region are already underway." As she took her seat at the table, her heartbeat remained consistent. She answered Naomi's smile with one of her own. Generous is the antithesis of the words cheap or parsimonious. Her voice maintained its composure as she posed the question. "I think that both of us are cognizant of the fact that that is not accurate. I have finished all of my assignments, Mr. Alluston. I have full knowledge of the worth of this property, and it is far greater than the price that you are proposing." Alluston's smile became somewhat less radiant, but not by much. "I am not fully convinced that I comprehend your message. We have put together a plan that takes into consideration the existing worth of the market. This is a contract that is fair for everyone who is participating." Naomi did not waver in her statement at all. She did not intend to back down from this situation at any point in the near future. "Fair," she repeated, "is the same thing that she stated again. I do not believe that you are aware of this, Mr. Alluston. Market pricing are not the only factor that determines the worth of this property. The issue here is about what is at risk. Your proposal is a really forward-thinking one. However, if the Crestwood estate is not included, your strategy will be reduced to half of its original worth. You are in need of this land. However, you are not getting it for a low price." Naomi continued to speak, and her voice did not waver. At this point, the room was utterly silent. She had everyone's attention. The actual worth of this property, the potential that it possesses that is not easily evident, and the acreage that Summit Resorts is overlooking are all things that I can demonstrate with records that are in my control. This property is not only necessary for the resort, but it is also required for the future success of the entire business venture. It was at this time that Chloe, who had remained silent up until this moment, spoke out to express her opinion. "We are familiar with the legal loopholes that you have been trying to keep out of sight. You may want to give consideration to a different approach. I am not going to let you take this property without putting up a struggle." Alluston's expression got increasingly harsh and unrelenting. He knew that their intention was not to be dishonest with him in any way. The executives exchanged nervous glances with one another as they gazed around the table. It appeared that Naomi's approach was yielding positive results. She was more than just a widow who was in sorrow at that point in time. She was a woman who was well acquainted with the consequences of her deeds. At this point, Mr. Alluston asked with a somewhat greater degree of caution, "What would your recommendation be in this case, Mrs. Sterling?" Naomi bent forward slightly, her gaze firmly set on his. "I am proposing that we reach an agreement that is mutually advantageous," she said. "I will give Summit Resorts permission to move forward with the project, but only if the terms are acceptable to me. Furthermore, those principles are not confined to financial problems alone. It is essential that I have guarantees. I would prefer it if the conservatory were left in its current state. My desire is for the art studio to stay exactly as it is. Furthermore, I would prefer that the natural state of the land surrounding the estate be preserved. This acquisition encompasses more than just property that can be owned. This pertains to the preservation of the legacy that my spouse left for me, for my family, and for generations to come." There was a sense of palpable tension in the room, and the weight of what Naomi had said continued to hang in the air. For the first time, Naomi saw Mr. Alluston looking like he did not know what to do. She was the kind of person that he did not usually know how to deal with. An individual who would not be convinced to do anything by bribery. He stood up from his chair and added, "We are going to need a little bit of time to go over these terms. Nevertheless, I believe that we will be able to reach an agreement of some sort. We will continue to communicate with you." Naomi was overcome with a sense of triumph as she and Chloe left the boardroom. Although they had not yet come out on top, they had still managed to convey a message. They were not going to concede. They were in control of the situation. As Chloe followed her mother into the elevator, she looked at her mother with a look of adoration on her face. "You did it, Mother. You really accomplished your goal." Naomi couldn't help but let out a smile as a sense of fulfillment welled up within her. "There is still more work to be completed," she said. "Be that as it may, this is just the first step in the process." Naomi had become a completely different woman from the one who had once lived in the shadow of her husband's heritage, but the battle over the Crestwood estate was still raging. She had become the type of woman who would fight for the estate every step of the way. As Naomi was standing there, watching the sun go down over the Crestwood estate, she was cognizant of the fact that this was only the beginning. Even though the battle was not yet over, the struggle for her future had played out favorably for her. With Chloe by her side and the legacy that David had painstakingly crafted still in existence, Naomi was ready to face any challenges that lay ahead. Naomi Sterling was adamant about making sure that the Crestwood estate remained in her possession, regardless of the difficulties that she would have to overcome in order to accomplish that goal. She would remain loyal to the love that David had for her, the sacrifice that he had made, and the promises that he had given her, no matter what the cost. Her determination had already been strong enough to shake the foundation upon which her adversaries were standing. Naomi had taken the tremendous loss that she had first experienced and turned it into a fight for the future of her family. She had proven that nothing would be able to take away from her what was rightly hers. But the war for the Crestwood estate was far from done. If you enjoyed Naomi's adventure and would like to see how the battle plays out, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There is still a lot more to this story, and it has not yet reached its conclusion. If you would like to provide your thoughts, please leave a comment below. What course of action will Naomi choose to take next? Please make sure to share this story with your friends and click on the bell icon so that you never miss a single update. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next installment of Life Tales. Until then, farewell. With love and respect.